ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Beatdowns with the Boz. And today I'm bringing you the green-white aggro deck that I played at the last Star City Invitational. I have a few minor changes, but for the most part, this is it. I was playing 2 Avacyn, but despite the card being so powerful, I didn't feel like it was doing exactly what I needed it to do. But just to talk about the deck that we have here, it is basically a card advantage deck that looks like an aggro deck. So it's got a really solid curve, 10 2-drops, not including Knight of the White Orchid or the morph creatures. And so you get off to a good start. And all of these creatures are generally speaking pretty good for their mana costs. Anafenza, Kintree Spirit, you can really look at it as a 2-mana 3/3 with upside. Duskwatch Recruiter, it doesn't always flip to be a 3/3, but with Collected Company, you can enable that a little bit more. Sylvan Advocate is certainly the premier 2-drop of the format. It's kind of like a Tarmogoyf. Tireless Tracker is a new addition from the Shadows of Eldrazi. That's a really good card. I think of it a lot like a offensive Courser of Kruphix, where if it sits on the board, it's going to generate a fair amount of value. Courser of Kruphix was really good at making sure you didn't die. Tireless Tracker is really good at making sure you kill your opponent. Deathmist Raptor is also one of the better 3-drops of the format. Trades with anything, and the fact that it can recur is quite good also. Knight of the White Orchid I have slotted in as a 3-drop, and the reason for that is because I don't actually like playing it on turn 2. I think 2 mana for a 2/2 first striker isn't actually very good. It certainly has some good applications against the aggro decks, and against the control decks, they generally just want to kill everything on sight, so the body is usually good enough on turn 2, but really the reason I'm playing this card is because I want to play it on turn 3 and get a land out of it. Collected Company is proving to be one of the more dominant cards in Standard. The fact that it is so flexible because if it's instant, it can be essentially act like a combat trick, and it just can generate so much mana so frequently. If you build your deck right, you'll get like the 2 creatures you get off Collected Company on average will be better than any other 4-drop that you have access to. I have Gideon, ally I have Zendikar as just a way to go a little bigger. Den Protector, Hidden Dragonslayer, they can recur the Deathmist Raptors, and they end up just being pretty solid cards on their own. They add a lot of card advantage, they add a lot of late game power, they add a little bit of, I guess a good word is nuance to your creature suite. Having access to 1 or 2 lifelink creatures is a lot different than having no lifelink at all. And Den Protector, the evasion that it gets, sometimes you can use it with Dromoka's Command or Anafenza or a Gideon Emblem to snipe a Planeswalker when your opponent's not suspecting, or just having 1 creature that can attack through a board stall. And then Dromoka's Command is not just my favorite removal spell, but I also just think the best removal spell in the format. It's similar to Collected Company in that it's really flexible. You can use it as a combat trick, sometimes getting a 2-for-1, and a lot of the good removal in the format is enchantment based. Notably, basically the only good ways to deal with Deathmist Raptor are things like Silkwrap and Stasis Snare. And Dromoka's Command excels in those matchups, making it so that your Deathmist Raptor is essentially an unanswerable threat. Like I said before, this is basically a card advantage deck that's pretending to be an aggro deck. And all of the creatures in this deck have a card advantage element to them, or almost all of them. The few exceptions are Anafenza and Sylvan Advocate are pretty one-dimensional in that they're just about power and toughness. But Duskwatch Recruit, you can just sink mana into it, digging for more creatures, and when those creatures come in the form of Den Protector and Hidden Dragonslayer, you're essentially digging for answers. Tireless Tracker turns every land drop into a redraw, as well as additional power and toughness on the board. Deathmist Raptor, obviously recurring, is a huge source of card advantage. Knight of the White Orchid helps you ramp up. So it ends up being a deck that's less about winning quickly and curving out, although it can do that, and more about just grinding your opponent down to nothing. So in the sideboard, I have just rounding out my removal with Silkwraps and Stasis Snares, which I don't really like main decking because of how many Dromoka's commands there are running around. Clip Wings is a good way to deal with an Ojutai, an Archangel of Ties, or a Dragon Lord Ojutai. Gideon and Nissa are for when I need to go a little more mid-rangey. And then two of the cards that I'm probably most excited about in the sideboard are Tragic Arrogance and Quarantine Field. So Quarantine Field is an exceptional card, particularly when you have 3 Knight of the White Orchids and up to 2 Nissas. It really lets you ramp up. And if you're playing against like a black-white mid-range deck or the blue-red control deck, Quarantine Field is likely to not only be a 2-for-1, but 2-for-1 2 of your opponent's best cards. So the fact that it can get Planeswalkers, it can get enchantments, it can get anything, makes it just a perfect catch-all in those kind of matchups. And then Tragic Arrogance is one of the best ways to catch up when you fall behind. Initially, I was trying to build this deck with the Gideon's and Nissa's main deck, and I wasn't playing the Collected Companies because I wanted to have a little bit more power rather than just more 2 and 3 drops. But when you're up against the aggressive white decks of the format or the Bant Company deck, they can just put so much pressure on the board all at once. Collected Company ends up being one of the best ways to catch up, and Tragic Arrogance right alongside it is also one of the best ways to catch up. If you've played a creature every turn and they've either killed it or bounced it with Reflector Mage, hitting them with the Tragic Arrogance is just literally the best thing you can do. Not only that, but if you're against a tokens deck with Westvale Abbey or a deck that's trying to do tricky stuff with Archangel of Ties, Tragic Arrogance gets around that pretty nicely because it makes them sacrifice everything. So it doesn't really matter if if their creatures are indestructible or not. So certainly one of the cards that I'm looking to really get people with in a lot of the post-board matchups, and is the card that I'm frequently going to be looking to save me out of bad situations. The mana is super good. Unlike the Bant Company deck, this mana base is just absolutely perfect. We've got 10 dual lands, and then just a bunch of basics. Certainly not having Lumbering Falls is a bit of a loss compared to the Bant Company deck, but the mana is just so smooth. You almost always get to curve out 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop perfectly. And that level of consistency is a big selling point of this deck. So that's the deck. I think that it's really good, and I plan on winning a lot of matches. So let's get to it.